Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are back on the updates 1.79 dev server, and it's time to talk about some BR changes and also some other things. This information is from Mike 10D, and if you don't know who Mike 10D is, he is a data miner who is always posts his stuff on the War Thunder Reddit. If you want to see his stuff, there will be a link in the description to all of the stuff that he has found out in his travels on the dev server, and let's just say he's the most comprehensive when it comes to this stuff, and therefore, in my opinion, the most trustworthy. We're going to talk about a few things which aren't related to BR, but are generally related to the ideas of BR. The first one is the US grant. So there is a line here saying the US grant Mark 1 might be available for the Xbox One. If you want to know what the US grant is, you will find it not in the aviation tree, but in this tree here. Here it is. Now, we do have a British grant, which was an event vehicle, and the grant one may be available for Xbox One users, I'm guessing as a premium to either get them started, or as another vehicle on the similar lines of the XM1, where if you want to, get involved and get into the game, it might be a way of being able to get into it and get a premium behind you for not that much money. So that's the first one here. The second one is the Object 906. Now this is the big change that a lot of people have been, I would say, celebrating and looking forward to. So the first thing to realize when we look at the Object 906 is the fact that it is now in rank 6. So before, it was before the BMP-1. And what they've done is they've swapped them around. The BMP-1 used to have the same BR as the 906, but they've pushed the 906 to 8.0 now and flipped them. At the same time, which is really nice, they've actually lowered the research cost of the BMP. The BMP used to be like 380,000, kind of like the T10M. It was either 380 or 360, and lowering it means, for me personally, I'm gonna love that machine, and I'm gonna play the hell out of it. Luckily, I've already spaded the 906, but at 8.0 it still should be competitive. It has everything you'd ever want from a machine, and armor can actually sometimes help you out because it means that certain rounds don't set off in you. 300mm of penetration with the Heat FS, and also the BR372 with 230. It's a little bit of a rough stock grind, but at 8.0 you're generally going to be going up against Leopard A1A1, so you should be able to kill them with APC BC and then save the heat for when you come up against mouses. Against the Americans, you will pretty much face the same stuff you already did. I just want to check if they've fixed the mouse's mantlet yet. Because they changed the E100's mantlet to rolled homogeneous armor. Nope, it's still 220. This should be 240. Unfortunately, they haven't fixed that yet. So, when it comes to the 906, it swapped places with the BMP. I think that is completely fine. The BMP at 7.3, it was already at 7.3, but it has access to stuff which will make it competitive, and it is competitive, but the main issue with it is that it doesn't have the stabilizer, it doesn't have as good of a gun as the 906, it has to play much more of that light tank supporting role, where the 906 can be a medium tank, it can be a heavy tank, it can be a light tank, it can be whatever the hell you want it to be. And if you want to just scout in it, it's really good at that. If you want to counterattack or be aggressive, it's wonderful at that. The only issues or weaknesses that the 906 has is artillery and airplanes. And in the first 5 minutes of a match, you generally don't see airplanes, and artillery, well, that's a luck factor. So generally, most of the time you'll be alright when it comes to it, and sometimes you'll get nailed and, well, you just have to brush it off and move on. Moving it up in BR, I think a great choice. It was a terror when it got down tiered, it worked really well at its tier, and when it was up tiered it never really had any issue. Now, going up even against 9s, I think it'll be fine. You'll just have to play it more passively like you would an actual scout, which it is supposed to be. The next aircraft to look at is the BF-109Z. So the BF-109Z, when it was on the dev server in the first place, it was a rank 3 premium, and the pre-order for the BF-109Z did say it was a rank 4. That has been changed for the dev server. They've also moved its BR up by 0.3, so it started off at 4.3, now it's at 4.7. When I looked at the factory specifications for this machine, it was nothing like what it is in game. I have flown it a bunch of times now, and I can say it will be a good aircraft as long as it keeps this wishy-washy flight model that it has. On top of this, it'll be useful in ground forces, not just to annihilate people, but also it has the 250 kilo, which gets mounted in the center of the aircraft if you want to have a look at it here. Overall, at 4.7, it's going to run into the American powerhouses, but then again at 4.3 it would have anyway. The P-51s, the P-47Ns, and against the British aircraft, it should be able to do pretty well for itself, as long as it's able to keep its engines cool and use it as an energy fighter, go up against those late tier Spids, which aren't so good in the whole energy fighting part. If it gets an airfield spawn, I think it'll be fine. If it gets an air spawn, we may have a few issues, kind of like when the Hornet came out first, and it just started annihilating everything because it was above everyone, and then they decided to give it upgraded guns, does the same thing, hidden gem that not a lot of people know about. But being up-tiered into 5.7 should be completely fine. The majority of German aircraft around that tier are 5.3, so generally you'll just get into 5.3 matches instead. You can see the K4, the D9, and now the D12, also the D13 are all 5.3, and the HE177. So generally you'll fight around that 5.3 area. Also there's a G variant, which is a 5.3. Yeah, the G10 and the G14 respectively. So overall, it will fight around its BR, and because of that, I think it will be fine. The guns are definitely an issue, especially with such a large airframe, so we may see it go down in BR just because a bunch of people buy it and they're not exactly sure how to use the guns, and they just miss the targets a lot because they're firing from way too far away, or they can't set up properly to get the guns on target. But you know how it is. Like, there's a bunch of planes like this in game, which, because sometimes they do balance by statistics. When we look at the next aircraft, we're looking at some more German stuff. The BF-110s. So the BF-110s, when they were added to the dev server, had incredibly similar BRs, or even the same BRs. Now, the C7s has been moved up by 0.3, the F2s has been moved up by 0.3, and the G2 has been moved up by 0.3. So before they were 273033, now they're 303337. And the only reason I can think of why this is the case is because of their impact in either the supportive role or the ground attack role, especially when we look at the G2. The G2 has some incredibly powerful engines on it. It does struggle in a way which I think a lot of people forget about with its elevator. One of the really strong things about the C4 was its maneuverability for such a large aircraft. As you go up with the G2 now, you end up with an aircraft which isn't as maneuverable and therefore will lose that slight advantage that the twin-engine fighter will have. Will it get outturned by monoplanes? Hell yeah, it will. Will they all? Yes, of course they will. But if you play that supportive role, I think 3.7, 3.3, and 3.0 is completely fine. Also, this indicates to me that they'll probably get an air spawn, which I am on the fence about. Especially with the F2. The F2's engines aren't that powerful, but it does have some powerful guns on it, which a lot of people will overlook. Like, 4792s and two 20mm MGF FMs may not sound like a lot, especially at 3.3, but you will burst mass people down. You will do a lot of damage to them, and then once you add on those 151s, if it gets an air spawn, you'll annihilate bombers coming at you. Same with the G2 if you want to play it in that fighter role, but I would definitely say ground attack is the way to go. It makes sense for it being 3.7. I think that they're so much better than these night fighter versions of the DO217, and the ME410s, they're definitely a mixed bag, so we'll have to see with the BF-110s. I can definitely see these vehicles being ones which may change in BR, just because of either if they get air spawns, or if they are not used how they're supposed to, or people use them in odd ways, like use the G2 as a heavy fighter instead of like an attacker, and stuff like that. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where they end up eventually. I feel like there's more change for them to come. The F-84G has been moved down by 0.3 BR. So if you know what the F-84G 26RE is, it's this machine here. I can't find any differences between this one and the Italian one, and also the two American ones. The American one, which is the closest, because this is a 21 RE. The American 21 RE as well, and also the, where is the other one? Oh, it's right here. So we have the B26, we have the G21, and then we have the G21 for Italy, and now we have the G26 for France. Now, as I said, I can't find any differences between them. Like, there might be slight bomb differences and stuff like that, but putting them all at the same BR makes sense to me. The only one which is different is, of course, the first F-84B, and that makes sense because of its loadouts, but also it is slightly worse than the other versions. Overall, being at 7.7, completely fine. The F-84 fits there because it means that it doesn't always go up against props like it used to and annihilate them, so I'm happy about that. I'm not really happy about Three Nations having the F-84 though, since I despise the plane quite a lot. The Focke-Wulf 190D12 is getting moved down by 0.3 BR, so you have an interesting conundrum now. It seems like initial reports of the Focke-Wulf series is they might have actually fixed the elevator, which means that they may be worth actually trying. But now you have the D9, the D12, and the D13, they're all at the same damn BR of this 5.3, and it's pretty much to stop them getting into 6-7 matches and getting stomped. The issue with this is there is now nobody for Britain to face, apart from unlucky TAR 152s or ME262s at 6.7, or they face the American P-51Hs, or maybe Japanese if somehow they can cobble a team together at rank 4. So overall, what you're getting is 3 Focke-Wulfs, which all have different armaments and all play exactly the same. The only difference being the armament in the front of it. I believe even the engines themselves are the same. I mean, I might be slightly wrong on this. I mean, I can have a look, right? I'm here, so I should do it. That is not the button I wanted. Alright, X-ray. So, this one has a Junkers UMO 213E1. That is what was supposed to be on the BF-109Z, if you want a bit of historical information. The X-ray of the D13, same exact engine, and the D9, which is my favourite Focke-Wulf of all time, D213A. Okay, so this has a slightly weaker engine than the other two, but overall, it's not going to really make that much of a difference, at least in my opinion. So, you're pretty much saying that the armament as well doesn't really matter on these, putting them all at the same BR. If they fix the elevator, then I can see the BRs going back up. If they don't fix the elevator, it'll just keep going down, because their main attribute of being able to dive at speed and shoot and then keep their energy go through, keep doing that, you can't do that because you can't damn pull up in the thing. So why not just take a BF-109K4, or why not just take a DO335 and show the bombers what's up? So yeah, that's an interesting one in my opinion. It would be nice to see the Doras come back into relevance. The Leo 451 has been moved down by 0.3 BR. Now this is the first of changes, which makes me think that these copycat aircrafts are kind of useless. So the 451 late, it is first of all folded, so you don't need to research it, and it's pretty much exactly the same as the Leo 451 early. I mean, there is slight differences, right, when we have a look at the turrets and stuff like that, but it's not enough for a BR change, especially when the main attribute of these bombers is the bomb load. So if the bomb load, the speed, the maneuverability are pretty much the same, you are changing... Well, let's see. This has two 7.5mm plus another 7.5mm. This only has one 7.5mm. That's the difference here. Two 7.5mm. Now, if you think that deserves a BR difference, I mean, go ahead. But then we're going to have to need like 100 different or 200 different BRs. Overall, the Leo 451 was a really fun aircraft to fly. I don't think I would put it up in BR just because it can't really defend itself. And it does run at the whim of the P-47. But hopefully now that the P-47's airspawn has disappeared, stuff like these French bombers, which are quite nippy, but not with the best bomb loads, they can get to their targets and have a little bit of fun. But yeah, I think dropping it BR is completely fine. The P-40Fs has also been moved down to 0.3. This is another vehicle which has an incredibly similar performance to its predecessor, the P-40E. I've flown it a bunch of times now, and my feeling is that there's no real difference between the two aircraft, and if there is a difference there, it is incredibly minute, especially with the mid-altitude advantages that you can gain in the P-40F, which don't really show themselves in aerialistic battles where this thing's mostly going to be used. If you use it in ground forces, the ground attack belts are really good in it against stuff like Panzer IVs, but that doesn't mean it should be up BR'd. And when we just compare it to what's around it, I mean, you got the B-34, the Wildcat, the first Corsair is 2.7, which is insane. Like, a Kitty Hawk of this caliber should never, or a Warhawk, sorry, should never be above a Corsair. That Corsair is grossly under-tiered, in my opinion. It just has a specific playstyle which doesn't suit newer players. But overall, it makes sense to me. They're pretty much the same plane, and now we have all of the P-40s at the same BR, so even the P-40C is at 2.7 as well. The next one is the RE-2000GA. Now, this is the third of what I would call a copycat vehicle. It's very similar to the Series 1. I already did a video on the differences, so you can go and have a look at that. Basically, what you're talking about is a fuel tank, the bomb load, and also something else which I can't remember in the front of the aircraft. Let's just have a look real quick. I can't remember what it is, but there is something slightly different at the front of it. As I said, go and watch the video. But yeah, the difference is, once again, very similar to the Leo 451 early and late. They're way too similar to have different BRs on them. Otherwise, you would have, well, not riots, you'd just have a lot of annoyed players, which basically it's like, well, I have to research this vehicle. It has the same performance as that vehicle, maybe even slightly worse when we look at the RE-2000GA, especially when it comes to ground forces. Sorry, not ground forces, it's better in ground forces, it's worse in air forces. So they're going to be like, well, why do I research this, especially if there's nothing after it? And it's at a higher BR, and it's got a slightly worse performance for what I want it to do. So, yeah, putting them at the same BR means that you have advantages and disadvantages either way. The Series 1 is more maneuverable, the RE-2000 is going to have a little bit better of a dive and also be able to have bombs. So, it makes sense. It's a tit-for-tat scenario where both aircraft are going to be slightly better than the other one at certain things, but overall they're going to be incredibly similar, so the same BR makes sense. The next one is the XM803. The XM803 also got moved in the tech tree, and I'm also not going to talk about names and stuff because a few names have been changed. I will mention, though, before we get into that, a few people have been asking me, the T-32, its turret was not where it wanted to be when we were on the dev server last. It was missing 98mm of thickness, and what I would like to say is the mantlet is back in business. It now has its 300mm instead of that pesky 200 that it had before. And I couldn't believe how many skins this thing had when I looked at it, because I was looking the other day. But anyway, yeah, so the T-32's turret's been fixed. It was known as a bug, and therefore it is all sorted, all done now, which is wonderful. The XM803 is now before the MBT-70, but they've also taken the arrow away between the XM803 and the Abrams, so you don't have to research these two vehicles in order to research the Abrams. You just have to make sure you have enough rank 5 vehicles to unlock rank 6. Very similar to all of the other top tier stuff. As you can see, the T-64A is by itself, the T-62M is also by itself. It's as if they're in their own league, so people can skip like the 8.0 and go straight onto the 9.0. The Leopard is an exception to this rule. The Type 90, as you can see, is by itself. And let's just check the AMX-40. No, the AMX-40 follows on as well. But yeah, pretty much at the end of the day, a lot of these are split now to make it so you can get those top tier vehicles without really worrying. So yeah, the XM803, now if you want to grind through this tree, you have to get the 803 instead of the MBT-70 first, meaning that you'll see a hell of a lot less MBT-70s around in a couple of years, but nowadays you'll still see a lot of them. When it comes to the 803, it is a worse MBT-70, and it's worse in the areas which really matter, and that's pretty much speed. When we look at top tier, speed and gun stabilization and penetration are the two things that really matter. Well, since they have very similar guns, the only real difference between them is the fact that the 803 has a limited engine, so therefore, because of that, it's going to struggle a little bit more going around the battlefield. Also, that 20mm you should never ever discount. It's great at killing the sides of tanks, it's good at air defense, and it's good at killing AA, and that means that the MBT-70 has an extra gear which the 803 does not have when it comes to dealing with other vehicles. So yeah, the MBT is faster and the 20mm is incredibly useful. So the 803 has to come before it in a lower tier sense. The next vehicle that we're looking at is the Object 906, which is the, well, we've gone around in a circle, haven't we? A lot of people, just to finish this video, a lot of people have been asking me to have a look at the Challenger. No, because it makes me incredibly sad. The Challenger is missing a lot of its real-world values. It's missing a lot of its armor package. It's also missing, well, it's got a stock round which is completely ahistorical to it, and it just makes me sad to look at. I'll comment on all the rest of them, but the Challenger I'll leave in a pit to die. But overall, there was a HESH buff. The HESH buff is to the Chieftain 120 and also the Challenger 120. It's up by 1 kilo. At the same time, because they've given Britain something, they have to take something away, so they've nerfed HESH penetration across pretty much all of the degrees that there are, so that's wonderful. I can't believe it. But above 60 degrees, it doesn't penetrate more, but it has the same effect of damage as I believe anywhere above 60 degrees, so that's nice, but still HESH is nerfed once again unless you're playing the Chieftain or the Challenger. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.